Hi, Rob.
Hello, how are you?
Thank you. I'm well. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Very welcome. Thanks for the invitation.
Oh, you're more than welcome. So lovely to see you again. I've realised it's been like nearly a year since I've seen you. We've been emailing and trying to meet up, but the diaries have just been so crazy.
Yeah,
So it's taken a pandemic.
yeah, it does. Often I find, you need a global crisis just to make things happen these days.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think
On that note, how are you coping? How are you coping with lockdown?
really well actually. I mean, it's kind of ironic in some respects because when the lockdown first started happening, there was all this talk about self-isolating and working in isolation. And I rather sort of jokingly said to some of my associates and colleagues, I've been working in self-isolation for about 12 years, so I'm pretty used to it and reasonably well set up for it. But no, more seriously, yeah, it brings some new challenges. I mean, the kids are at home all the time, which is brilliant, but distracting. And I think that I feel I'm not a keen user of the word busy, but I feel busier than ever. I've got a lot on at the moment, and I feel very grateful because the line of work that I'm in terms of audio and coaching, I've got a very full plate at the moment, and it's been actually lockdown and this whole COVID crisis has been quite reaffirming in terms of the business model that I've got and that I've created over a number of years. Because sometimes you do question it. You think, have I got the right business model here? Am I doing things in the right way? And then it takes, like I say, it takes a global crisis to reaffirm it to some degree, because the demand seems to have gone up somewhat, certainly in the first couple of weeks. But no, it brings its own challenges. I mean, I've had to adjust my way of working. I've had to let go of a number of things in terms of how I think I should be working, and also perhaps just being a little bit more relaxed with it rather than getting too uptight about routines and all the rest of it. So perhaps exercising a little bit more flexibility and adaptability than I usually would. And everyone else seems reasonably happy and healthy, and my clients seem quite happy. So I use that as a measure of success, and I would say things are going reasonably well. But I miss some of the freedom, like being able to just jot off to the beach or go for a coffee with someone, or go swimming or something like that. I think after 8 weeks or so, whatever it is now, starting to miss that a little bit. But at the same time, just feel deep gratitude for the simple pleasures, the garden, the meadow, and just being the opportunity to be around family.
Yeah, I'm absolutely with you on that. Same here. It's slightly different circumstances, but I've pretty much been in lockdown for over a year now. Not quite as an extreme version as what we're going through at the moment. Yeah, so I've coped all right with it. Very grateful for having a garden, which I know a lot of people don't. But also, and this might be a bit controversial, I said to my other half, I said, I'm really grateful that we don't have kids yet, because I don't know how I'd cope. What is
Mm.
it like, Rob? What's the reality of having, I don't know how old your kids are, so
5 and 7, so young and demanding in the right ways. They just want
yeah.
to play all the time. It's good. I mean, again, I'm lucky. They've grown up with a father that's in self-isolation. What I really mean by that is somebody who works from home. So I think that, for them, and it's curious to me actually, because a lot of people they know are obviously people that they know through us, and they do the same. So I can't imagine quite what it's like for them, but what I have got a sense of is that they are growing up in a world, unlike the world I grew up in, where actually working from home is quite normal. And, because we had that as they were very young and growing up with it, I think some of the boundaries that people might be faced up against right now, if it's for folks that are working from home for the first time ever, one of the big I think one of the big steps to successfully working from home or around family is having really clear boundaries. And I remember that being a challenge for me, even when the kids were really young. I think one of the hardest things for me, having very young kids, I'm kind of getting used to it now, was when you hear them screaming or something's going off and you do in the middle of some important work. I couldn't help but want to just go and see if everything's all right and drop what I was doing. But now I know that no matter what chaos is going on outside my door, I know that someone will come and fetch me if I'm needed, but otherwise I'm left to it. And the kids know that as well. They're really great now. They'll come and knock on the door if they really have to. And often I know if they're knocking, it's something urgent. But if not, they just like, basically, if daddy's upstairs and the door's shut, leave him to it, and then he'll come down and play when he's not working. So yeah,
great dynamic. That's a really, and actually really, I can only think like for your kids to learn that early on will be hugely valuable for them later on in life.
yeah, I do wonder sometimes what impressions it sets, because I think it's really important to have clear boundaries between work and play, and not to fudge the two. So yeah, I think that it's nice that I have got workspace that I would normally work at outside of COVID, and I'd be going there most days, if not spending time with people elsewhere outside of the house, under certain circumstances. But they've seen that too, and they know that's where I normally go, but they understand that we're under different circumstances at the moment. So really, in some respects, those boundaries have just been amplified somewhat.
I really love that word, by the way, boundaries, because it's not something I ever grew up with. When I was small, still am, always been a force of nature. So if I come in the room, everybody knows about it. But also vice versa. So I've never really set any boundaries for other people. And we had our first challenge as a young couple. But we've lived together for 7 years, but we've not spent 24/7 together for 8 weeks before. We've been traveling, which has been challenging, but a whole different scenario. And in week 1 there were 2 key things I learned. If I say I'm going to do the washing up, do the washing up. And the second thing was, he's a professional, he knows what he's doing, keep out of it. And we have actually since then. The week 1 we were both in the same room. We have now separated into rooms. He comes down for coffee breaks and stuff and fills me in, but and vice versa. But it is really important that we both have our own boundaries, so to speak, for our own work. So yeah, he's public sector, I'm private sector as well, so there's completely different approaches. I would just go casually go like, why don't you use Zoom, or why don't you use this app, and why don't you use this app? And he goes, data protection, Barbara. I was like, oh yeah, that's a thing. Yeah, no, it's been really interesting. So just for the people who haven't had the pleasure of meeting you before, Rob, could you give us a really quick sort of intro into your world and what it is that you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So my working life is based around conversations, and also creating, I hope, compelling listening experiences. So as you know, Barbara, a lot of the work I do these days is around podcasts and audio. It's not just that. I do, I work on a number of privately funded projects as well, some of which are to do with music, some are to do with immersive 3D sound, which is contributing more towards virtual reality and that kind of augmented reality future that we have. So I occasionally write about that stuff and offer some sort of consulting expertise and mentoring to folks pioneering in that space. So it's quite a varied mix, and I love the variety. But my background is in technology, and actually on the service delivery side, the customer experience side of technology, and beyond that also coaching, which is a qualification and experience that I gained from being a manager in technology, and then I went into the world of coaching. I've been doing that for 13 years now. But it's interesting because I found coaching through audio, and I've found audio through coaching, so the two work very well. And these days they overlap heavily in my own little niche and world. I do a lot of work consulting and helping on the strategy side for organizations such as the Association for Coaching and the Audio Engineering Society, and I provide mentoring for students from places like the SAE, which is an audio engineering school. So I do, this world of sort of professional development and this world of audio heavily overlaps, which is an absolute joy for me, because they're outside of my own family, they are my two primary interests. So essentially I'm paid to do what I would be doing if I wasn't being paid to do it anyway, which is really exciting. But on the podcast side of things, which is often where you and I have conversations, almost all, if not all of my clients, again, they specialize in some area of professional or personal development. So people who are experts in, sales or personal performance, perhaps, or just anything from all the stuff that we get to talk about from time to time, anything from like, business strategy to marketing, and time management, all of that kind of stuff. And I geek out on all of that stuff. So again, from a production point of view, it's wonderful for me to experience and be part of all of this content in some shape or form, as well as share that into the world. Because I think what excites me about it is you don't know what the ripple effect of that is, but it's all positive and good, and that anybody that touches it is going to get some positive benefit from it in their life. And that's what keeps me highly motivated on a daily basis, working from home with kids.
Yeah, absolutely. And the ripple effect being massive. I mean, I've listened to quite a few of the podcasts that you've been involved in, and they have affected me in lots of different ways and have then resulted in something else happening. And that's just one person. And I know a lot more people listen to those episodes than just me. So now I think podcasts have become, or audible podcasts, vloggers across the sphere has become a huge resource. And can you, I can remember the 90s. I know you can remember the 90s, but can you remember a time before we really had the internet the way it is now, and where we just didn't have access to all this knowledge other than having to go and buy a wind-up tape or a CD, and they would all be massively manufactured, and it would take loads of money to make that. We're a click away. I mean, this setup is a very low tech setup. We will improve as time goes on, but for me to be able to do that and just chuck it out there, it is amazing. For me, I'm still at that point where I'm still marveling at the technology that is available.
It is a marvel. I love that word. I think it is. It blows my mind every day. I mean, I started today with a conversation with somebody in Australia, and then I was on a group call with people around the world. And that's a typical day. It'll start with somebody in Australia, it'll end with somebody in New Zealand, probably. And we just take it for granted to a degree. It just, every time it happens seamlessly, most of the time, it blows my mind. And the fact that we can connect and share ideas in this seamless way, effortlessly, and at very low cost it's just absolutely incredible. I think we have the opposite problem to what we had in the 90s now, which is back then you were desperately trying to find content. Now you're overwhelmed with it. And I think it's the opposite problem almost. You have to curate your own content. And I think that's where podcasts come in really well, because in many respects, people love radio. They've always liked the spoken word. There's something special about it. And I always think that's to do with the fact that it invokes your own imagination, rather than being distracted with the visuals, much as I love video and all the rest of it. So I think there is a part of us that does occasionally, or at certain times, prefer the spoken word. And I think that with that, we're often looking for interesting and compelling content. Previous to the advent of podcasts, we had audiobooks on cassette. I've still found some the other day, actually, a collection of essentially professional development CDs. It was audiobooks on like 12 CDs or something like that. And then we had podcasts, of course. But I think the joy of having podcasts available to us now, and the sheer volume of subjects and material that's available to us now, is we can curate our own content. Unlike radio, which is it's fed to you in a way that somebody else, the programmer, feels it should be shared with you. And sometimes even then, if there's something specialist that you're interested in, you can't get enough of it. So yeah, I think the great thing about podcasts is you can find something you're interested in, and you can probably find an overwhelming amount of information on that subject. If not, soon you will be able to. And I think it's just a great opportunity for us to create our own learning journey, I suppose, when it comes to that sort of stuff. But even then, it doesn't have to be about learning. It can be surely about, entertainment. You can create your own entertainment, and you essentially create your own channel or playlist, and you curate your own soundtrack to your life, I suppose. And that's what's really exciting about podcasts for me at the moment. You can really tailor it and customize it to your own personal preferences, And yeah, I think that's just really, really exciting, because that just adds to the whole richness of the world, because we're all individual. We've all got our own ways of doing things. And I think what I love about connecting with people like you and Kate is when we start talking about podcasts is, yeah, finding out what you've been listening to and what you've learned, because, you know, it's not going to be the same thing that we saw or heard last night. They're likely to be very different things. And I think that just adds to the richness of an ongoing conversation.
And that's the perfect segue into my next question, which is in the press and stuff, they've been talking a lot about the bookshelf. So I'm sort of replicating that, but also taking into consideration podcasts, other virtual experiences. What are your sort of books or podcasts, your go-to things that you would recommend that have either shaped you or things that you're immersed in at the moment?
Gosh, that have shaped me. I think it's hard to pick one out of the air, because I think that we're all evolving. And I think as part of my own evolution, I started to seriously think about the podcasts I've listened to over the last 10 years, and books too, and it's got to be in excess of like 500, I would say. So to pick one out of that is pretty difficult, but I think it's easier for me to do it in sort of under specific themes and topics. And I think actually I'm inspired on a daily basis, hearing, you know, or seeing perhaps on social media what other people are listening to, and then I might go and just check out a short amount of it at the moment.
Is there anything at front of mind at the moment that is on your radar that you would recommend, that have a listen to that's quite good? Or
Front of mind, without shouting out some of my own clients and stuff.
You're more than welcome to. You're more, and also we should say that you do also have your own podcast, which
I do. I have got my own podcast, which is actually I've been working on behind the scenes at the moment. So yeah, I'm going to be publishing some more stuff very soon with that, Inspirational Creatives. So thank you, Barbara. Yeah, actually, yeah. At the moment, I'm working behind the scenes on a larger project called Coaching in the Workplace, and it's been a great. We're still in the thick of it at the moment. It comes out at the end of June, and it's essentially featuring top coaches from around the globe. It's a collaborative experience. It's essentially a virtual conference over 3 days.
wow.
And for anyone who's interested in coaching and that part of the world, obviously I am, but for anyone that's interested in that sort of stuff, I think it's well worth checking out, just surely because one of my roles behind the scenes with that particular project is to manage the content strategy, which feeds into the marketing function of the Association for Coaching and what they do. They're the folks that are delivering this conference. But what that allows me to do, and one of the things I feel I'm best at doing, is actually getting really deep into the content and understanding what it's about, and helping people to understand what's in it for them, in terms of why should I be listening to this, or which piece of this should I be paying attention to. So I think I'm sharing that with you because one of the things I have got a high respect for, I suppose, is that the wealth of experience amongst the speakers. I mean, you bring together, tens of and we're talking 40, 50 people that are absolutely at the top of their game in that industry, in that world, and they're bringing somewhere between sort of 10 and 40 years worth of experience, and they're summarizing it for you, their biggest lessons, their biggest learnings, in half an hour, 45 minutes, with a presentation and a bit of a narrative. It's just beyond inspiring for me, just to be able to condense all of that experience into such a short session or a short few days.
Yeah.
I'm seeing a lot of that stuff happening more and more these days. I think this is where the world is going, these virtual summits, particularly in this climate. I mean, it wasn't designed. This is something that's been developed over the last couple of years. It's complete coincidence we're in a lockdown right now as it's being delivered. And yeah, I think that those sorts of things I'm finding really inspiring. So not so much the content, but the way it's being delivered. This is an event you can attend even in the conditions of lockdown, and they're not the only ones to be doing it. This stuff's going on, as you well know. There are webinars, and I've myself have delivered webinars on how to start podcasts and all the rest of it. And I think it's just such a great, I don't think it's the only way we should be connecting, but I think it's such a great way to connect for the efficiencies and the benefits that technology offers.
And that's a really interesting point, because that's where my world and your world is starting to collide together with the guys in the virtual space, in video space. And I've been on a very steep, I have been reading more and more about virtual events for a while now, but you know, for very obvious reasons, haven't really been able to pursue anything. But I had a really great workshop that I mentioned to you earlier that I attended last week. And what blew my mind, honestly, is that I logged on. They were very, very techy, very seamless, very skilled. But I logged on, there were 40 other people there. There were people from Moscow, from LA, there was a lady from Malaysia. And it wasn't just watch and listen, which is what I guess associate with audio and video. It was collaborate, and they used another great platform which was called Mural, I don't know how you pronunciate it, Mural, where what we learned, we started event designing there and then in real time. I could see everyone's cursor moving around, putting little pictures into like brainstorming sessions, and I was just like, this is incredible. Like, I mean, it's incredible that this person in LA is up at 3 a.m. in the morning to be able to come and do this bit of learning. But yeah, no, I was absolutely mind blown, and I think it has really inspired me to see that there is way more beyond that than I can even imagine of what the future in the events, audible and video sphere that is going to happen. And talking about accessibility, you know, someone who's been ill for a long time, there's no way I could have gone to that training course. It was meant to take place in Germany, but now it's suddenly become accessible to me, and that's just great.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely. And I think it's more needed. I mean, when we talk about inclusion and digital inclusion, and we look at people's learning needs and disabilities, and as you say, accessibility, I think having all of these different medias and all of this different technology is so important to the world today. I mean, you know, we're not that far off, you know, the world population being 9 billion, and we've all got to get on, and we've all got to share with each other, you know, our own experiences. And I think technology lends itself incredibly well to that. Without forgetting the real world experiences too. And I think that's what's great about, you know, the local events that we get to share space with.
Yeah, absolutely. But I'm starting to think that once I've overcome my first few hurdles, I should challenge myself to look at how I can create things that are more accessible. So for example, we have a lot of members who can't come to events because of childcare, and that's a really valid reason. Of, you know, you spend all your day in your office, do you really have time to not spend time with your family and to go to something else? So how else can we create value for those people? Or when I think of my music festival, so I've just been promoted this year, even though it's not happening this year, to look after accessibility. And I flagged this and said, well, there's one aspect of making things accessible on site, but actually, are we missing out on a massive audience who could be there virtually if we had the kit there to broadcast it? Obviously, there's a price tag attached to that, which I'll be working on that, trying to get that down. So yeah, right, we've come to a point in the call when I pull out my jar of really random questions.
It's exciting.
Yes, it's exciting because I wrote these about 2 years ago, and the other day I've pulled one or two out where I thought I was drunk when I wrote this. So I'm really sorry, Rob, I don't know what's about to happen. So, this is very apt. If you could witness any event, past, present, or future, what would it be?
Oh, that's a really good question, isn't it? Gosh, I'm sure there are many, actually, if I really sat down and put my thoughts to it. But I think, I don't know why, but for some reason Woodstock like sprung to mind recently. Probably because, yeah, as I say, I'm a bit of a reader, and I've been reading sort of biographies of musicians and that kind of thing not so long ago, and that came up, you know, their own accounts of that particular experience. So I wouldn't mind seeing that with my own eyes and ears, you know, to get a real detailed impression of it. So
I think I would caveat that and say see it, but maybe not fully experience it, because you
yeah.
had to be really robust to be able to get through that weekend.
Yeah, I could imagine. Yeah. So I'm not sure that it would be my number one, but it's one that it just jumped out at me. But yeah, I mean, there are so many, aren't there? I mean, I would have loved to have been around when they first landed on the moon, just to kind of get a sense of what the nation or what people were feeling. You know, I think not so much, yeah, just seeing it on the television, which is an easy thing to do, but just to get a sense of, gosh, I mean, if you think about that and the shift in terms of, you know, as a bit not similar but very different to what we're going through now. You know, it's a psychological evolutionary shift for mankind, those sorts of things. And yeah, I mean, just you know, just yeah, just so many. I mean, great speeches, and there are lots of things I would have, like, you know, the whole Rosa Parks stuff back in the '60s, and yeah, there are just so many events that I would have loved to have seen or experienced firsthand, just to get a sense of the gravity of those situations. So, yeah, great question.
Yeah, I think what comes to my mind is iconic gigs.
Mm.
So one of the things that I still love to watch online because it gives me goosebumps is Queen at Live Aid.
Yes,
I mean, what a set.
that's a brilliant one. See, that could be high up as a number one for me. Yeah, like I was around and I remember seeing it on television and that, but to actually be in Wembley Stadium at that time, wow, that would have been that still blows my mind and brings tears to my eyes just seeing the footage of that. So yeah, that would have been a good one. Yeah.
I think what's quite interesting about the question is the future part, because the past and the present is quite, well, because it's now and it was and it's history, but the
Mm,
future. I'm actually listening to a podcast at the moment called Reimagine,
mm,
which has blown my mind and is a good one for me at the moment because I'm struggling with the amount of realism I'm getting from the news. So this Reimagine one is very visionary, how things could be, and thankfully it's narrated by lots of scientists. So yeah, actually it gives you real hope that things are happening.
yeah.
So I think my future one would be if I could have a little glass bowl and see how we're going to deal with the environmental crisis,
Mm,
if we are, and if we do, how and when. And I have hope that it's going to happen, because for some reason we as humanity we always get ourselves in a mess and then somehow dredge ourselves out of it. It's not always pretty, but we get there somehow.
mm. I agree. I think so. Well, I mean, you know this more than anybody, but sometimes, you know, the there's the dark before the dawn, isn't there? There's always this whole, you know, there's a crisis, a bit like now. Let's hope that the outcome of this is going to be lots of positivity. I mean, that's how I try and, you know, well, not try, but that's how I remain optimistic, is going, okay, where are the opportunities in this crisis? And I don't mean that from a sort of an entrepreneurial making a quick buck. I mean, like what wasn't working before that now we have the chance to make better, because we have to, you know, it's that sort of thing. And I mean, it's fascinating what's coming out of this whole COVID business at the moment. I mean, like you, I mean, I don't keep close deliberately. I don't keep close to the media, just because of the way it's curated and it's spun. For me, it just doesn't resonate where I'm at. And again, that's why I think you know, I've been a fan of podcasts for many years, but I've just gone more and more into that space, perhaps unsurprisingly. But I think that, yeah, it's just amazing what's coming out of this current time, isn't it? Like some of the images that we're seeing from space in terms of how the environment's being benefited with less pollution and all the rest of it. And yeah, people, I think, reassessing their own values in terms of what's important to them and all the rest of it. And yeah, our economy is going to take a huge hit by the sounds of things, but let's hope that the new economy that comes out the back of it, perhaps putting people in the environment first rather than profit, Not to say that profit's not important, but it may not be the number one priority. It might be somewhere further down the line, like 5, 6 or 7, and we're putting environmental, people, social, cultural values at the top there. So yeah, without going off on one, I'm with you. I'd love to, I'm hoping we experience that in our lifetime. That would be amazing.
It's all about finding silver linings in everything that we do, because nothing's ever perfect, is it? So if if everything goes tits up, there's always a silver lining somewhere. Even if you can just, even if it's just the fact that you can say, oh, it's gone tits up, it's done now, so let's move on. Anyhow, Rob, it's been an absolute pleasure having you today. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope that in due course, not too far in the future, we'll be able to see each other with cocktail in hand, surrounded by the good eggs, and with DJ in the background, and having a great time.
Oh, I look forward to that. Superb. Thanks, Barbara.
Thank you. Bye.